Story 1. Zombie on Subway. The night draped New York in a heavy black shroud. Fog curled through the city, so thick that streetlights flickered like dying stars, their glow swallowed by the gray. January's wind was a blade, slicing through Jake's coat as he stepped out of his Manhattan office, the clock nearing midnight. At 25, his eyes carried the weight of long hours, his hair a tangled mess from a day hunched over a computer. The streets were empty, save for the occasional taxi cutting through the mist, its tires hissing against the wet pavement. Jake's breath clouded in the air as he hurried toward the 14th Street subway station, its entrance yawning like the mouth of some subterranean beast, ready to swallow the lost and the weary. The station was a tomb of silence, broken only by the low moan of wind snaking through the tunnels, carrying the chill of places best left undisturbed. A loudspeaker crackled, its mechanical voice droning about platform edges, a hollow warning in the stillness. An old homeless man sat huddled in a corner, clutching a threadbare blanket, his clouded eyes staring into nothingness, as if seeing things the living weren't meant to see. A middle-aged man in a crumpled suit stood near the platform's edge, briefcase in hand, his gaze vacant as if waiting for something long forgotten. Jake stood apart, the city's loneliness pressing against him, though he'd grown accustomed to nights like this. The F train screeched into the station, its brakes wailing like a lament from the depths. Its headlights pierced the fog and Jake boarded, settling into a seat near the door. The car was nearly empty, its fluorescent lights flickering, casting long shadows across the cold plastic seats. 5 other passengers shared the space, an elderly woman in a tattered coat, her bony hands clutching a canvas bag as if it anchored her to the world, a construction worker, his hard hat tilted over his eyes, snoring softly, a young woman with headphones, her head swaying to an unseen rhythm, eyes half closed, a man in a suit reading a newspaper with unsettling focus, his fingers turning pages in a steady rhythm, and a skinny kid in a hoodie, face hidden, staring at a phone, his fingers unmoving on the screen. The train lurched forward, plunging into the black heart of the tunnels. The windows turned to mirrors, reflecting the dim glow of the car's interior. Jake pulled out his phone, scrolling through mindless tweets to drown out the silence and the cold. But soon a chill crept up his spine, sharp and unyielding, as if someone had breathed ice down his neck. The air grew heavy, oppressive, a weight settling on his chest. He looked up, scanning the others. The old woman's hands trembled on her bag, her knuckles white as if fighting some unseen terror. The construction worker's snores had shifted, uneven now, like the gasps of a man running from something in his dreams. The headphone girl swayed too perfectly, her movements mechanical like a puppet jerked by invisible strings. The man in the suit turned his pages, but his eyes never moved, staring through the paper into an endless void. The kid in the hoodie hadn't stirred, but his phone screen was dark, lifeless. Jake told himself it was exhaustion. He'd worked over 10 hours, his eyes burning from staring at a monitor. But then a stench hit him, rancid and choking, clawing at his throat. It wasn't the usual city reek of garbage or sweat. This was the smell of decay, of something long dead, abandoned in a forgotten corner. He pressed his sleeve to his nose, searching for the source. But the car was unchanged, just the 5 passengers and the empty seats. A sound broke the silence, low and deliberate, from the far end of the car. A dragging, scraping noise like a heavy sack pulled across the floor. Jake's heart pounded as he turned to look. There, near the door to the next carriage, stood a figure. He hadn't seen them board. They were hunched, head bowed, wet hair plastered across their face. Their clothes were tattered, soaked through, dripping water onto the floor in slow, rhythmic drops. The stench rolled off them in waves, thick and suffocating, filling the car with the reek of death. The train stopped at 23rd Street, the doors hissing open to an empty platform lit only by faint, flickering lights. No one moved. Jake wanted to run, to switch cars, but his legs felt anchored, heavy as stone. The figure began to move, dragging its feet toward him, each step echoing with a sickening scrape like bones grinding against each other. He glanced at the others, desperate for a sign that someone else saw this. But the old woman was muttering now, her voice a faint, trembling chant like an ancient prayer. The construction worker's snores had stopped. His head lolled to one side, unnaturally bent, his eyes open but unseeing. The headphone girl's swaying ceased, her eyes fixed on nothing, blank as twin wells of darkness. The man in the suit flipped his pages faster, but Jake saw it now. The newspaper was blank, its pages empty. fluttering as if caught in a phantom breeze. The kid in the hoodie lifted his head and Jake's breath caught. His eyes were black hollow pits devoid of light like doorways to oblivion. The figure drew closer. Its skin was gray, cracked like something dredged from a forgotten riverbed. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were twin abysses, dark and endless, swallowing all light. Its mouth twitched, emitting a rasping, guttural sound like wind rattling through an ancient grave. Water dripped from its clothes, pooling on the floor, each drop a heartbeat in the silence. Jake's pulse thundered, his body screaming to flee, but he was paralyzed, pinned by the weight of those empty eyes. Then the headphone girl turned to him. Her smile was a grotesque caricature, sharp and wrong, like a slash of ink on pale flesh. The man in the suit's newspaper began to flutter, pages turning on their own as if caught in a spectral wind. The construction worker lifted his head, revealing a jagged gash across his throat, bloodless and raw, like a wound torn open by unseen hands. The kid in the hoodie stood, his movement slow, water streaming from his sleeves, joining the growing puddle on the floor. The train jolted to a stop in the middle of a tunnel. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the car into a darkness so thick it felt like drowning. Jake's breathing was loud, panicked, mingling with the dragging sound, closer now, relentless. A hand touched his shoulder, cold as death, slick and hard like something pulled from a watery grave. He screamed, thrashing wildly, stumbling from his seat. The lights flared back on, blinding him. He fell to the floor, heart racing, and looked around. The figure was gone. The headphone girl, the man in the suit, the construction worker, the kid in the hoodie, all gone. Only the old woman remained, curled in her seat, her eyes wide with terror. "You saw them," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. "The ones from the crash. They're trapped here in the dark." Jake didn't speak. He scrambled to the door, waiting for the train to reach West 4th Street. When it stopped, he ran, his legs shaking, out onto the platform. But as he climbed the stairs, he heard it again, the slow, deliberate drag echoing from the tunnel behind him. He turned, seeing only the black mouth of the tunnel, but the stench lingered, heavy and oppressive, as if something watched him from the shadows. Jake never rode the subway at night again. He told me this story months later in a dimly lit Brooklyn cafe, his voice still trembling as he spoke of those black hollow eyes and that cold, slimy touch. The old woman had told him of a long-ago crash on the F line, a derailment that claimed dozens of lives, their souls trapped in the tunnels, dragging their broken bodies through the dark, searching for the living to share their pain. Night shift subway workers, he said, whispered of wet, shadowy figures appearing in empty cars, but they kept quiet, fearing they'd be called mad. Jake lives in Brooklyn now, sticking to buses or ride shares after dusk, but the sound of a distant train screech still sends a shiver down his spine, as if something out there, in the endless dark of the tunnels, is still calling his name. Story 2. The Curse Beneath the Tunnels. The night smothered London in a rare blizzard, an anomaly in a city more accustomed to rain-soaked gloom. Snow fell in heavy sheets, blanketing the cobblestone streets, dimming the golden glow of ancient street lamps, and transforming the city into a silent, frozen tableau. Beneath the earth, in the labyrinthine tunnels of the London Underground, a tragedy was brewing, unseen and unstoppable. No one could have foreseen that two trains, the Piccadilly and District lines, would collide with devastating force in the tunnel near King's Cross St. Pancras, shredding metal and claiming dozens of lives. But the true horror wasn't the crash. It was what awoke in the aftermath, stirring in the shadows of the tunnels. The Piccadilly train, packed with late-night commuters heading west from central London, hurtled through the darkness. Across from it, the District Line train, equally crowded, rushed from the east toward the city's heart. A fatal signal error, a momentary lapse in the control system, sent the two steel giants crashing head-on in a damp tunnel near King's Cross. The impact roared like a beast from the underworld, metal tearing, glass shattering, and the screams of passengers swallowed by the dark. Over 50 souls perished instantly, their bodies crushed in the twisted wreckage. Blood pooled on the train floors, mingling with water seeping from cracks in the tunnel ceiling. In that darkness, something stirred, an entity born of death and despair, not of this world. The call came at 2 a.m., cutting through the storm's wail. Charlie Evans, a seasoned rescue worker with salt and pepper hair and eyes sharp as flint, led a team of 10, clad in bright orange gear, armed with flashlights, stretchers, and cutting tools. Charlie had faced fires, floods, and wrecks, but the dread he felt descending into the tunnel was new. A primal unease that clawed at his chest. The air was frigid, oppressive, as if an invisible hand pressed against his lungs. The acrid stench of burnt metal mixed with something fouler, rotting flesh. Impossible so soon after the crash. The team advanced into the tunnel, their flashlight beams slicing through the inky dark, illuminating the wreckage of the two trains. The cars were crumpled, distorted, like the corpses of metal beasts felled in battle. The drip of water from the tunnel ceiling mingled with faint moans. Survivors, they hoped. Charlie split the team. One group to search for the living, the other to cut into the trapped cars. But as they worked, an eerie sensation took hold. The moans faded, replaced by stranger sounds, dragging footsteps, rasping whispers, as if the darkness had found a voice to curse the living. Ellie, a young paramedic, was the first to notice something wrong. Checking a crushed car, she heard a faint tapping like fingernails on cold metal. "Charlie, over here," she called, her voice trembling. Charlie aimed his flashlight through a shattered window. Inside stood a figure, hunched, head bowed, wet hair plastered across their face. Their clothes were tattered, soaked, water dripping from their sleeves into a black puddle on the floor. Ellie stumbled back, her heart pounding. "Charlie, do you see that?" she whispered. Charlie didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the figure, his skin prickling. Its skin was gray, cracked like a corpse submerged for weeks. Its eyes, no, not eyes, but hollow black sockets devoid of light or life. Its mouth twitched, emitting a guttural rasp like wind through forgotten corridors. Charlie signaled the team to fall back. "Stay away," he ordered, his voice low but firm. But before they could move, the figure lurched forward, dragging its feet with a bone-chilling scrape. From the wreckage, more figures emerged. Dozens, their gray skin gleaming under the flashlight beams, their black eyes burning with malice. A woman in a torn business dress clutched a handbag, her fingers skeletal. A man in a long coat, his throat gashed open, bloodless. A child, eyes empty, gripping a mangled doll, water dripping from its matted hair. They moved slowly like puppets jerked by unseen strings, advancing on the rescue team. Ellie's scream shattered the silence as her flashlight clattered to the ground, its beam spinning across the grotesque faces of the undead. "What are they?" she cried, her voice breaking. Charlie gripped his crowbar, his pulse racing. "Run!" he barked, but it was too late. The undead surged forward with unnatural speed, no longer sluggish. Tom, a teammate, was seized by a figure, its icy hands locking around his throat. His scream cut off as he was dragged into the dark, the snap of bones echoing in the tunnel. Charlie swung his crowbar, smashing it into a zombie's head. The skull cracked open, but no blood spilled, only a black viscous ooze reeking of decay. "Keep moving," he shouted, yanking Ellie toward the exit. The team fought desperately, wielding crowbars, flashlights, anything as weapons. But the undead were relentless. A severed arm kept crawling. A headless body staggered forward, driven by an unholy force. Their black eyes gleamed with hatred, as if the team's presence mocked their eternal torment. Then came the wraiths, ghostly shadows with no clear form, just swirling black smoke with crimson eyes spinning like whirlwinds. They glided through the air, passing through the rescuers' bodies, filling their minds with visions of the crash. Twisted metal, broken bodies, endless screams. Ellie collapsed, clutching her head as a wraith's whispers flooded her mind with images of death. "You left us to rot," it hissed, its voice a blade of ice. Charlie pulled her up, shoving her toward the exit. "Don't stop!" he yelled, his voice raw. The team fought through the tunnel, the undead and wraiths closing in. Liam, a burly firefighter, swung a sledgehammer, smashing a zombie's chest. But it only staggered, its hollow eyes unyielding. Sophie, a medic, fired a flare gun into the darkness, the red light revealing a swarm of wraiths circling like vultures. Charlie's crowbar struck a wraith, but it dissolved into smoke, its laughter echoing mockingly. Only 4 of the team reached the tunnel's exit near King's Cross St. Pancras. Charlie, Ellie, Liam, and Sophie. The dragging footsteps and whispers pursued them relentless. As the glow of the station appeared, a massive wraith blocked their path, a roiling mass of black smoke with countless crimson eyes, spinning like a vortex. "What did you do to us?" It roared, its voice like grinding metal. Charlie pushed Ellie, Liam, and Sophie through the exit, turning to face the wraith. He knew he couldn't win, but he could buy time. "Go!" he shouted, swinging his crowbar into the smoke. The wraith dissipated, but a zombie's icy hand seized his leg, dragging him down. Ellie screamed, reaching for him, but Liam held her back, pulling her to safety. They stumbled onto the platform, the station's lights blinding after the tunnel's darkness. Collapsing, they gasped for air, too afraid to look back. The dragging sounds had stopped, but the stench of decay lingered, as if the undead were still watching from the shadows. Charlie's body was found at dawn, sprawled in the wreckage, his eyes wide, his face frozen in terror. The authorities called it a tragic accident, but Ellie knew the truth. She told me this story, her voice trembling, her eyes red with tears. Those creatures weren't just the crash's victims, they were vessels of rage, pain, and a curse born in the tunnel's depths. She swore she heard their whispers in the dead of night, as if they were still hunting her. The Piccadilly and District lines still run, but late-night workers at King's Cross whisper of wet, shambling figures, dragging footsteps, and crimson eyes lurking in the dark. Ellie left London unable to bear the feeling of being watched, but she says the chill of the tunnels follows her, as if those vengeful spirits will never let her go. Story 3. The Fire Beneath the Earth. Berlin, a January night in 2025, was gripped by a rare blizzard, an anomaly in a city more accustomed to rain-soaked melancholy. Snow fell in sharp, stinging flakes, blanketing the cobblestone streets, dimming the golden glow of ancient street lamps and cloaking the city in a frozen hush. At Alexanderplatz station, the pulsing heart of Berlin's transport network, a catastrophe was brewing, silent and inevitable. An electrical fault in the station's aging wiring, neglected for decades, sparked a ferocious fire that consumed trains, ticket booths, and the lives of those too slow to escape. But the true horror wasn't the blaze. It was what lingered after the smoke cleared, when the darkness of the station awoke. Alexanderplatz station, a bustling hub even in the late hours, was alive with the hum of commuters. An S-Bahn train had just departed while a U-Bahn train idled, taking on passengers. A spark from the station's outdated electrical system ignited in a utility tunnel nearby, erupting into a firestorm. The flames spread with ruthless speed, engulfing train cars, ticket halls, and trapping over 60 souls, passengers, station staff, and homeless wanderers seeking shelter underground. Screams were drowned by the roar of shattering glass and melting metal. When the fire died, only charred corpses remained strewn across the wreckage. But in the damp, blackened tunnel, something stirred. Vengeful spirits and undead husks born from the agony of unjust deaths. The call came at 1 a.m., piercing the storm's howl. Lucas Miller, a weathered rescue worker with a gaunt face and eyes heavy with years of loss, led a team of 12, clad in fire-resistant orange gear, equipped with oxygen tanks, flashlights, and cutting tools. Lucas had faced collapsing buildings and floods, but the dread he felt descending into the tunnel to Alexanderplatz was new. A visceral chill that clawed at his core. The air was thick, oppressive, as if the darkness itself were breathing. The stench of smoke and melted plastic mingled with something fouler, rotting flesh, impossible from bodies still warm from the flames. The team entered the station through a service tunnel, their flashlight beams slicing through the choking black smoke, illuminating the charred remains of the trains. The cars were twisted, blackened like the skeletons of a forgotten industrial age. The drip of water from the tunnel ceiling blended with the faint moans. Survivors, they hoped. Lucas divided the team, one group to search for the living, another to cut into trapped cars, and a third to keep the escape route clear. But as they worked, an eerie unease took hold. The moans faded, replaced by stranger sounds, slow, dragging footsteps, rasping whispers, as if the station's walls were recounting the horror that had unfolded. Anna, a young paramedic, was the first to sense the wrongness. Checking a charred train car, she heard a faint tapping, like fingernails on cold metal. "Lucas, do you hear that?" she called, her voice trembling. Lucas aimed his flashlight through a shattered window. Inside stood a figure, hunched, head bowed, singed hair plastered across their face. Their clothes were tattered, scorched at the edges, and a dark, viscous liquid, not water, dripped from their sleeves, pooling stickily on the floor. Anna stumbled back, her heart pounding. "Lucas, what is that?" she whispered. Lucas didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the figure, his skin prickling. Its flesh, if it could be called flesh, was gray, cracked as if burned and then steeped in some infernal liquid. Its eyes were hollow black sockets, devoid of pupils or light, mere abysses swallowing all hope. Its mouth twitched, emitting a guttural rasp like wind through a burned-out corridor. Lucas signaled the team to retreat. "Stay back," he ordered, his voice low but firm. But before they could move, the figure lurched forward, dragging its feet with a bone-chilling scrape, like bones grinding against each other. From the wreckage, more figures emerged. Dozens, their charred skin gleaming under the flashlight beams, their black eyes burning with malice. A woman in a tattered business dress clutched a scorched handbag, her fingers skeletal. A man in a long coat, his throat gashed open, bloodless. A child, eyes empty, gripping a mangled doll, black liquid dripping from its singed hair. They moved slowly, like puppets jerked by an unseen force, advancing on the rescue team. Anna's scream shattered the silence as her flashlight clattered to the ground, its beam spinning across the grotesque, charred faces of the undead. "What are they?" she cried, her voice breaking. Lucas gripped his crowbar, his pulse racing. "Run!" he barked, but it was too late. The undead surged forward with unnatural speed, no longer sluggish. Jonas, a teammate, was seized by a figure, its icy hands locking around his throat. His scream cut off as he was dragged into the dark, the snap of bones echoing like a knife's edge. Lucas swung his crowbar, smashing it into a zombie's head. The skull cracked open, but no blood spilled, only a black viscous ooze, reeking of unspeakable decay. "Keep moving," he shouted, yanking Anna toward the exit. The team fought desperately, wielding crowbars, flashlights, and jagged metal scraps from the wreckage. But the undead were relentless. A severed arm kept crawling, a headless body staggered forward, driven by an unholy force. Their black eyes gleamed with unyielding hatred, as if the team's presence mocked their eternal torment. A zombie, once a station worker in a tattered uniform, reached for Lucas, its scorched fingers curling like claws. Lucas slammed his crowbar into its chest, but it only staggered, then pressed forward, as if the fire had burned away all sense of pain. Amid the chaos, Lucas saw something worse: wraiths, formless, floating shadows, mere wisps of black smoke with crimson eyes, swirling like whirlwinds. They glided through the air, passing through the rescuers' bodies, filling their minds with visions of the fire, flames devouring passengers, bodies burning in agony, screams that never ended. Anna collapsed, clutching her head as a wraith's whispers flooded her mind with images of death. "You let us burn," it hissed, its voice a razor slicing through her thoughts. Lucas pulled her up, shoving her toward the exit. "Don't stop," he roared, his voice hoarse from smoke and fear. The team battled through the tunnel, the undead and wraiths closing in. Max, a burly firefighter, swung a sledgehammer, crushing a zombie's chest, but it only staggered, its hollow eyes unyielding. Clara, another medic, fired a flare gun into the darkness, the red light revealing a swarm of wraiths circling like vultures. Lucas's crowbar struck a wraith, but it dissolved into smoke, its mocking laughter echoing through the tunnel. Only 5 of the team reached the tunnel's exit near Alexanderplatz. Lucas, Anna, Max, Clara, and Felix, a young technician. The dragging footsteps and whispers pursued them, relentless like a nightmare with no end. As the station's glow appeared, a flicker of hope sparked, but a massive wraith blocked their path, a roiling mass of black smoke with dozens of crimson eyes, spinning like a storm. "You left us to rot," it roared, its voice like grinding metal reverberating in their skulls. Lucas pushed Anna, Max, Clara, and Felix through the exit, turning to face the wraith. He knew he couldn't win, but he could buy time. "Go," he shouted, swinging his crowbar into the smoke. The wraith dissipated, but a zombie's icy hand seized his leg, dragging him to the ground. Anna screamed, reaching for him, but Max grabbed her shoulders, pulling her to safety. "We can't save him," he yelled, his voice choked with grief. They stumbled onto the platform, the station's lights blinding after the tunnel's darkness. Collapsing, they gasped for air, too terrified to look back. The dragging sounds had ceased, but the stench of decay lingered, as if the undead were still watching from the shadows. Lucas's body was found at dawn, sprawled in the wreckage, his eyes wide, his face frozen in terror. The authorities called it death by smoke inhalation or entrapment, but Anna knew the truth. She told me this story in a small cafe on Berlin's outskirts, her voice trembling, her eyes red with tears. Those creatures weren't just the fire's victims. They were vessels of rage, of pain trapped in the dark. burned by the flames and forgotten by the world above. She swore she heard their whispers in the dead of night, calling her name. Alexanderplatz station was repaired and reopened, but night shift workers whisper of charred, shambling figures dragging footsteps in the tunnels, and crimson eyes lurking in the dark. Anna left Berlin, unable to bear the feeling of being watched, but she says the chill of the tunnels follows her, as if those vengeful spirits will never let her go.